I was folding towels the way I always did, 3 precise creases corners, lined, stacked by color, when my phone buzzed. It was a bank alert. My eyes skimmed it out of habit, but then I stopped. $1,257.34. Vendor Cascabel Azul, beachfront resort location, Cabo, San Lucas, Mexico. I stared at the number. That card was linked to the joint account I opened with Kevin last fall, the one he begged for just to get caught up. He'd promised it was temporary. I remembered his exact words. "You won't even notice, Ma. I'll close it by winter." It was now July. I called him. He picked up on the second ring, sounding breathless. "Hey, Ma. Sorry, can't talk long. Things are nuts at the firm 3 proposals due this week." He was always quick, always smooth, but I didn't speak. I just listened. From the speaker came a faint splash, maybe waves and laughter, high-pitched, carefree. A woman's voice called out, "Cav, don't forget the sunscreen this time." Then the line went dead. I didn't call back. I didn't leave a message. I opened my bank app, tapped the joint account, and hit the freeze button. It made a soft click, like a lock sliding into place. My heart didn't race. My hands didn't shake. I just stood up, walked into the kitchen, and turned the kettle on. 20 minutes later, I was at my desk with my tea and a small stack of printed transactions, jet skis, spa packages, something called Diamond Eclipse Wine Tasting. I highlighted each item in yellow and slipped the pages into a labeled folder. July theft. That night, I didn't sleep much. Not from anger, just from the weight of a quiet realization. It wasn't just about the money. He was never going to stop unless I did. So the next morning, I opened a second folder, marked it Freeze Plan, and began listing every account that still had his name on it. There were more than I remembered. By noon the next day, Kevin texted a photo of a half-eaten sandwich on a white plate, captioned lunch at my desk. "Back-to-back meetings. Hope you're resting, Ma." He added a smiling emoji with sweat on its brow. I stared at the message, then at my computer screen. The timing was uncanny. Just 30 minutes earlier, I'd opened Shayla's public story. She must have forgotten I still followed her account. Or perhaps she didn't care. There he was, my son, in a sky blue linen shirt, raising a cocktail glass poolside. Her caption read, "Earned every drop after a long, hard vacation." The clip panned to him laughing carefree as a waiter placed another plate of oysters beside his drink. I didn't get angry. I just felt smaller, a little more invisible. I scrolled back through the last week of posts. Jet skis. A yacht brunch. Matching white robes with Cascabel Azul embroidered in gold thread. It wasn't one careless charge, it was a whole lifestyle. Bought on a card that had my name on it. I opened the banking portal again and printed the full July statement. Highlighted the transactions. Spa for 2. Champagne at check-in. A designer bag store I didn't recognize. I sorted them by date, then by type, travel, dining, luxury, and totaled the damage. It was just under $9,000 in 1 week. I'd raised Kevin to know better, but knowing better and doing better weren't always the same. I added those pages to the July theft folder. Then I walked to the back of the house and opened the cedar chest I hadn't touched in years. Inside were the trust documents from after Harlan died. I had kept everything: power of attorney, deed records, access authorizations. Sitting on the floor, I flipped through the oldest file, one labeled Initial Trust Design. Contingency structure. My own handwriting stared back at me, firm and deliberate. I didn't realize I was smiling until I reached for the pen. It was almost dusk when I sat at the kitchen table, that old cedar folder beside me, and allowed myself to remember just how far this had gone. After Harlan died, the silence in the house became unbearable. Kevin was 32 at the time, freshly laid off, bitter at the world, but still sweet to me in moments. He'd moved back in for just a few months to regroup. I cooked, cleaned, paid the bills. I told myself it was a blessing. At least I had company again. When he said he wanted to launch a financial consultancy, I believed in him. He had the charisma, the charm, the shine, but none of the planning. I sold the cabin we'd kept in the Catskills to give him seed money, our quiet retreat that Harlan and I built one summer with savings from a double tax return. Cavan never asked whose name was on the deed. He just thanked me and took the check. Then came the car loan, then the website designer, then the shortfall on his taxes. I kept thinking, if I help now, it'll pay off later. He'll get stable. He'll stand on his own. But each time I gave, he leaned harder. And every time he promised, it was the last ask it never was. I drained half my pension in 3 years, quietly, without telling anyone. When Shayla wanted to open her boutique, I co-signed a lease. When they said their rent was too high, I helped with the down payment on a condo, my name still on the papers, but always called Cavan's place. No one knew what I was giving up. Not my book club friends, not Lottie, not even the woman who cuts my hair and always asks how the golden boy is doing. I stared at the spreadsheet I'd made tonight, listing every transfer and temporary loan from the past 5 years. It didn't look like love anymore. It looked like theft disguised as gratitude. The only consolation was that I had tracked it all. And soon, every number in that ledger would work in my favor. I called Lottie the next morning. Her voice crackled through the line, crisp and unmistakable. Still keeping your books neat. Mal, I told her I needed her eyes on something urgent. She didn't ask more. Just said, come by after lunch. Bring everything. Her office was quieter than I remembered she'd pared back to part-time years ago. But her desk still had that same brass lamp we picked out together back when Harlan and I set up the estate. Lottie hadn't aged much, except for the cane leaning beside her chair, and a slowness when she rose to greet me. I placed the folders on her desk without a word. She opened the first one, adjusted her glasses, and began flipping. 20 minutes passed before she said anything. You've documented everything. I nodded. You've got receipts. Account numbers. Legal standing on the condo, the cabin, and the accounts. She tapped the second folder. Joint accounts with you as primary. Trusts where you're still sole grantor. I never removed myself, I said softly. Even when he asked. Lottie sat back. So what do you want? Mal retaliation restitution. I looked at her. I want to be free. And I want to be done. She studied me for a long moment, then reached for her pen. We'll start by freezing everything in your name. Lock the trust accounts. File for property control on the condo. And we'll revoke access to all linked cards immediately. It'll take a day or two to finalize. I handed her the updated spreadsheet. There's more. Shayla accessed the secondary trust last month without permission. Lottie's eyes sharpened. Then we'll add misappropriation to the complaint. That'll make the court listen. I exhaled not relief, but something steadier, like air returning to a sealed room. We worked in silence for another hour. By the time I left her office, a weight had shifted. For the first time in years, the numbers were finally on my side. That night, I made tea and watched the screen door sway gently in the wind. Cavan would be back from Mexico tomorrow. His key wouldn't work. His access was gone. He came back 2 days later. I heard the wheels of his suitcase crunch across the gravel before I saw him. Through the lace curtain, I watched as he reached for the keypad on the condo's front door. His brow creased. He tried again, slower this time. The keypad blinked red. Then he tried his old key. Nothing. The banging came next. First soft, then louder. Then the phone calls. 3 missed calls. Then a voicemail. I didn't bother to open. Finally, a text. The account's frozen. What did you do? 5 minutes later, he was at my door. Ma, he barked as I opened it. He was sunburnt and still wearing sandals. Why the hell is the condo locked? And where's the money I tried to get gas and my card got declined? What's going on? I looked at him. Really looked. His eyes darted, searching for control. The tan lines around his eyes, the pink, blistering nose. He didn't look tired from work. He looked inconvenienced by the consequences. You should check your bank app, I said. He scoffed. You froze it. Are you serious? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Silence does what shouting never can. It gives people room to hear their own guilt. He stepped forward. You can't do this. It's illegal. I'm your son. I met his eyes steady and level. And I'm the owner of the condo, of the accounts, of the trust. His mouth opened closed, then curled in a smirk. Shayla's gonna love this. You really want to humiliate me like this? I didn't speak. I just shut the door slow and clean. He stood outside for a while after that. I could hear his footsteps, pacing, his voice rising and falling in one-sided arguments with the voicemail on his phone. I waited until his car pulled out of the driveway before I walked to my filing cabinet and pulled out the next set of papers, property title transfers, and the formal eviction notice. The deputy was scheduled to arrive by morning. He came back before noon, this time in slacks and a collared shirt, like he thought dressing the part might undo everything. Mom, we need to talk, he said as soon as I opened the door. This is going too far. I let him in. He walked straight to the kitchen, like it was still his home. He sat at the table, hands splayed, waiting for me to follow. You froze everything. The condo, the accounts, even the utilities are in your name. I can't access anything. Shayla's threatening to leave if this isn't fixed by tonight. I poured tea into a cup, only one, and sat across from him. You told me it was temporary, I said. That it was a bridge, not a highway. He scoffed. I told you I needed help. You said you'd support me. I did, I replied. For over a decade. He leaned back, exasperated. You think this is how families work? You pull the rug out and expect me to start over? I have responsibilities. Clients. A life. I didn't flinch. You had all of that when you lied about where you were. You told me you were working. You were in Mexico. He looked away. I was decompressing. I needed space. On my dime. Before he could speak again, there was a knock at the front door. I stood and opened it. Deputy Hart tipped his hat. Ma'am, he said, I have those notices. Cavan was already on his feet. What the hell is this formal eviction? Hart said, setting the envelope on the counter. Filed yesterday. You have 48 hours to vacate the property. All items must be removed by then. Cavan's jaw dropped. You called the police on your own son. No, I said calmly. I called the county. Shayla arrived moments later, already mid-rant, until Hart handed her a second envelope. Her face turned ghost white. You can't be serious. This is our home. No, I said again. It never was. As they argued, I stepped out to the porch and let the screen door close behind me. Inside, the clock ticked louder than before. The next morning, I logged into the trust portal just to verify everything was in place. The accounts showed frozen status. No movement. No access granted. But then I saw it, an attempted login from an unfamiliar device flagged under suspicious activity. I clicked into the details. The IP address was local, registered under Shayla's name. She had tried to access the secondary trust, the one I'd only mentioned once in passing years ago when she'd asked about future security. She must have taken notes I never realized she was keeping. I forwarded the alert to Lottie. She called within the hour. We'll add it to the record. It's enough to file for attempted misappropriation. I nodded, the phone warm against my ear. They also listed the Catskills cabin on Airbnb. I found the profile. There was a silence on the line, then a slow exhale. Do you have proof? They uploaded interior photos with my grandmother's quilt still on the bed. I made that quilt when Cavan was born. Lottie didn't ask how I felt. She knew better than to crowd a wound. I'll file a cease and desist and prepare a fraud complaint. We'll have a sheriff seal it by tomorrow. That afternoon, I drove out to the cabin with Deputy Hart. The trees were thick and summer green, but the air around me felt colder than it should have. The front door still had my key code, but inside the scent of someone else's cologne lingered. He placed the county seal across the frame, stepped back, and gave me a nod. They'll get a copy of the notice in today's mail. We stood on the porch, the silence of the woods pressing in. This was supposed to be their inheritance, I said more to myself than to him. He adjusted his hat. Doesn't mean they were entitled to steal it early. I drove home without music. Just the quiet hum of my tires and the weight of what I had finally accepted. My son hadn't slipped, he had chosen. And I had finally chosen too. That evening, I pulled out the living trust papers. I didn't expect his voice to tremble, but it did. The voicemail arrived at 2:16 a.m. I was already awake, lying in bed, with the trust papers open beside me, the ink still fresh on the line where I had signed my name. "Mom," he started, and there was a pause. I know I messed up. Shayla pushed, but I let it happen. I should have been better. I didn't think you'd go this far. You always forgave me. Please, don't cut me off completely." His voice cracked on the last line. Then silence. I listened to it once, deleted it, then turned the page in the trust folder. The next morning I met Lottie at her office. She was waiting with a cup of tea and a quiet look of approval. "You're ready," she said. "I am." Together we opened the living trust. Cavan's name sat there in the beneficiary line like it always had, simple, printed presumptive. I drew a single black line through it, then signed beneath the new name, Neela First. I hadn't seen her in nearly a year. She was in graduate school now, education, I think. When I first met her, she was a shy intern at the city office, eyes always scanning every ledger like she was trying to learn a second language. She once stayed 2 hours late to help me reconcile a missing decimal. After her last day, she sent me a handwritten note. "Thank you for seeing me. Not just as a student, but as someone who could matter." I kept that note in my recipe box. "She won't expect it," I told Lottie. "She'll honor it," Lottie replied. That afternoon, I made the official filing. We contacted the county to finalize deed reassignments and flagged any future access attempts from Cavan or Shayla under legal lock. The trust was sealed, the assets protected, the legacy redirected. And for the first time in years, I went to sleep with no phone beside me, no alerts pending, no what-ifs circling above my bed. By dawn, the sheriff's notice would be posted at the condo. The notice went up on a Thursday morning, sealed to the condo's glass door, printed in bold foreclosure action, in effect. Property to be auctioned by county order. I didn't need to be there, but I drove past anyway. I parked across the street, stayed in my car. I saw Cavan before he saw me. He stood on the sidewalk reading the notice. His hands were clenched into fists. Shayla paced behind him, phone pressed to her ear, yelling at someone, maybe a lawyer, maybe her mother. Cavan turned toward the building, then toward nothing. He looked smaller than I remembered, like a boy after a tantrum standing in the mess he made. My phone buzzed. His name lit the screen. I let it ring. Then came the text. Just one line. "You're destroying me." I sat with it, let the words hang, then typed my reply. "You built this with your choices." He didn't respond. Later that day, a deputy arrived to tag the car in the driveway. The Mercedes I had co-signed for once upon a time. It would be repossessed, along with the condo, and sold at auction to repay the debts. A necessary, clean sweep. I returned home and brewed a cup of tea. There was nothing left to be done, nothing to undo. My legacy no longer belonged to someone who believed they were owed it. At dusk, I opened the drawer beside my bed and pulled out an old photo, Harlan holding Cavan as a baby, both of them squinting into the sun, caught in mid-laugh. I ran my thumb over the corner. Not sadness, just distance. A kind of mourning that had aged into clarity. I slipped the photo back in and retrieved the letter I'd written 2 days ago. It was addressed, stamped, and ready for the mail. Neela's name was printed in blue ink across the front. I would drop it off in the morning, but tonight I sat by the window as the last light faded, watching the wind move through the trees. The text came late, nearly midnight. Why did you do this to your own son? No greeting. No punctuation. Just a sentence, heavy with disbelief, not apology. I read it once. Then again. The screen glowed cold in my hands. And then I typed, "You did it to yourself." I hit send and deleted the entire thread. Then I removed his contact. There was no satisfaction in it. Only silence. But silence can be clean. It can mark the end of something without having to bury it in noise. The next morning, I walked to the mailbox and dropped in the letter to Neela. Inside, it was a handwritten note and a copy of the trust confirmation, along with a simple sentence, "I chose you, not because you needed it, but because you earned it." I imagined her surprise, and then her smile. I spent the afternoon tending to the herb garden behind the house. The basil had come back strong, and the thyme was already flowering. Harlan used to call them my tiny green victories. I liked that. By evening, I set 2 cups out on the table. Not for Cavan, not anymore. Neela arrived just before dusk, breathless and stunned, holding the envelope I'd mailed. "Are you sure?" she asked, voice trembling. I nodded. Legacy is not a blood contract. It's a reflection of values. And you reflect mine. We drank tea, talked about her graduate classes, about the students she wanted to teach someday. She told me she'd never imagined someone like me would choose someone like her. I told her I'd been watching her work long before she ever noticed. And now it was her turn. That night, as I turned off the lights and locked the doors, I realized there were no more alerts to dread, no balances to check, no lines to cross out. Everything that needed to be frozen had already been sealed, and what remained was mine, quiet, earned, and intact.